The sinking of the USS Indianapolis was perhaps one of the worst, if not the worst, sea disaster in the U.S. Navy's history. On the eve of the end of the Second World War, in July of 1945, the Indianapolis delivered parts of the Little Boy, the nuclear weapon, to the United States Air Force Base on the island of Tinian. Afterwards, the ship departed for the Philippines, but it never reached the final destination. At 01:15 on July 30th, the ship was torpedoed twice by a Japanese sub. I heard an explosion which knocked me off the ready box, knocking me off the deck, said Santos Peña, seaman first class. I had no time to get off the deck before I heard the second explosion. I got up as soon as the second explosion and looked forward and found the whole bow was gone. I tried to get communication between Sky Control and the bridge using sound power phones and the ship's service phones, but both were out of operation. The Indianapolis sank in just 12 minutes, 280 miles from land. The ship was 610 feet long. That's 2 football fields sinking in just a little over 10 minutes. As the bow plunged and Indy listed to starboard 45 degrees, Chief Warrant Officer Leonard Woods ordered his men to abandon ship. But Woods himself remained, trying to send an SOS as Indy headed for the sea floor. The elements the stranded men faced over the following 4 days were brutal. The sun severely burnt them, and the darkness of night resulted in miserably cold temperatures. Dehydration and hypothermia led many to hallucinate. Life jackets waterlogged, and many succumbed to their exhaustion and drowned. Desperate for nourishment, some of the men gave in and drank seawater. Granville Crane, machinist's mate second class, reported, "Men began drinking salt water so much that they were very delirious. In fact, a lot of them had weapons like knives, and they'd be so crazy that they'd be fighting amongst themselves and killing one another. And then there'd be others that drank so much that they were seeing things. They'd say, 'The Indy is down below and they're giving out fresh water and food in the galley.' And they'd swim down, and a shark would get them, and you could see the sharks eating your comrade."
Very first light, Chief. Sharks come cruising. So we formed ourselves into tight groups. You know, it's kind of like old squares in a battle, like you see in a calendar, like the Battle of Waterloo, and the idea was, shark comes to the nearest man, that man he starts pounding and hollering and screaming. Sometimes the shark would go away. Sometimes he wouldn't go away. Sometimes that shark, he looks right into you, right into your eyes. You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to be living until he bites you, and those black eyes roll over white, and then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming. The ocean turns red, and in spite of all the pounding and the hollering, they all come in and they rip you to pieces.
Despite having to face these horrible conditions, the sinking of the Indianapolis also resulted in the worst shark attack in human history. Many attacks came from the oceanic white-tip shark species, drawn in the hundreds by the noise of the explosion and blood from the wounded. The survivors formed groups of shark watches to fight off the sharks together. But after picking off the dead and the wounded, the sharks inevitably went after the survivors. On August 2nd, a PV-1 Ventura pilot on a routine sector search spotted the winding slick of fuel oil. The pilot alerted the USS Doyle and the USS Bassett, nearby destroyers, which rescued the remaining 316 men. About 300 men went down with the ship that day, with nearly 900 making it into the water alive. Only 316 of the 900 survived the merciless deep. 316 of the original 1,200. There are many accounts of Indy's sinking from her survivors. Each share the harrowing events they experienced in the unrelenting shark-infested waters in the summer of 1945. Only a handful of them are still with us today.